Welcome back to episode 11 of Little Rock Ridge. We've made it to the penultimate episode of this series, can you believe it? Doesn't time fly when you're following a YouTube series? That's the saying, right? You'll be delighted to hear that it's taken us 11 episodes, but today we finished the exterior of the park. Even though in episode 2 I explicitly said, and I quote, I won't be going nuts with the exterior. Well, you were wrong past me. Theme parks will often purchase various pieces of land surrounding the park to use as storage. Take Thorpe Park for example. Just a quick glance on Google Maps shows that they own this land to the north of the island, plus they have their technical hub next door to the car park. I wanted to create defined concrete slabs, so I used the smooth concrete flat roof pieces as a base, and then used the colourable panels as the cracks. I recreated the same fencing from the backstage area on the other side of the park, which is imaginatively two of the tall metal fence pieces on top of each other. Once again, I copied the barrier I made in episode 5. If you watched my A Very British Park series, these porter cabins will be all too familiar, except these ones are obviously completely vanilla. With the cabin built, I could then duplicate it a couple of times around the area. Whilst trying to get to sleep one night, I thought about how cool it would be to have an old broken down ride in a maintenance area. What can I say, always got Planko on the mind. I chose the carousel as it's nice and small and isn't covered in flashing lights. I placed some barriers around the ride to stop staff from being tempted to hop on a horse for a cheeky selfie. Obviously rides come with proper human ride operators, so unfortunately we have to shove her in a box if we want this ride to look unused. I built a custom operator booth out of basic shapes. As for the rest of this plot, it was time to go clutter crazy. I added a whole heap of metalwork and support pieces. I figure this might well be where refuse management takes place, so I popped down a bunch of industrial bins as well as the same guest bins from the park. Parks likely keep multiple versions of signage, so I stole various ride and building signs from around the park. Once again, I copied our main bench type to indicate the park keeps a bunch of spares. I added a heap of random props to give the area a more messy look. Lastly, I surrounded the lot with our usual foliage to block sightlines. With my bits done, it's time for this week's guest. And this guest is not just any guest. This is our third and final secret guest of the collab. SCReconcile is a master builder in the Channel 5 gaming community and previously held the title of King Coaster. Until I stole it from him. In my opinion, he is easily one of the most talented Planco builders in our community, with creations such as Thunder Lake, Traction Park, and was the absolute mastermind behind the Grand Tour planetarium ride for Wix's duo contest. I mean, literally look at this thing.
What's gonna happen now?
Oh, the roof.
Oh my
Okay,
god,
this is really cool.
This is so cool!
This must have taken so much work.
What?
It literally feels like we're moving.
My
What
brain,
the fuck?
yeah, oh my god.
What? Jeez.
Feel free to look around with the camera a bit, okay. Oh my god, it's all the way
You're going to
around,
look at
right?
It's a satellite.
Oh my god, it's so... I cannot, I'm too excited right now.
I know, right? Mind blown. SCReconcile was tasked with creating our second and final coaster for the park, and he did not disappoint. Without further ado, here he is to talk us through his creation.
Hello. So Moomin asked me if I wanted to contribute a coaster to Little Rock Ridge, and since I hadn't built anything western before, I was more than happy to give it a go. The lack of TMTK in DLC didn't worry me too much, since the base game already lends itself quite well to the western theme. I found myself a few times wanting to use the odd DLC item, but it wasn't too bad. I think probably the hardest part of the whole thing was the space requirement. I think it was a 23 by 9 grid, and in that space you've got to fit obviously the coaster station, ideally a maintenance shed, the queue, and also ride photos. To fit the western theme, I went with the Canyon Runner, where I spent a good amount of time trying to come up with different designs that used all of the space to get the coaster as long as possible, but while still trying to make it look good and most importantly fit in with the rest of the park. My original plan was to have a coaster weaving in and out of a mountain facade, but soon after I built it I realised how much I actually hated it. It didn't look bad, but in relation to everything else in the park it just looked like a big bulky monolithic structure which was just way too large. So I think the best thing I did from there was to scrap the whole thing and start again. This time sinking the whole coaster into the ground to hide the rocks from view because the rocks can be quite ugly to look at, which meant also had the added benefit of lowering the lift section. Since it is a mine train coaster, it doesn't make sense to have the lift section, that's all. The one disadvantage of choosing the Canyon Runner over a wooden or hybrid coaster was the supports. The default supports didn't really fit the theme that well, so I made the decision to make just full custom wooden supports, and although it was the first time I've ever made wooden custom supports, I think they turned out pretty decent. They're a little wonky in places, but if anything it helps fit the old crooked western theme even more. However, because of this, it did push the piece count way above the blueprint limit to about 7,000. So once the terrain, rock work and custom supports were done, I moved on to the buildings. One of them to cover the maintenance shed, and then the other one to encase the station, and the rest of the track, which I felt was a little bit too high for the custom spots. I wanted to give purpose to why the track is maybe where it is, so by having it run through the building, it gives it some functionality. To get inspiration for the buildings, I just did a quick Google search for literally just Wild West mines, and I found a few good dioramas to use for reference. This gave me all the basic shapes and ideas for the structure. So I started by building out the rough shape just using on-grid wall pieces, and then when I'm happy with the layout and the material choices, I then did all the structural decorations, so things like the corner edging, the support beams, doors and window frames, if they're functional, roof supports, so anywhere from a basic A-frame to a Queen's post to a mono pitch frame. Basically anything that makes the building look like it can support its own weight. And then finally the clutter. Any wall that looks a little bare or floor that looks a little empty, just fill it with something, and then it's just a trial and error to see what looks good. One advantage of building quite late in the series is I could look around at some of the other stuff people have made for inspiration and ideas how best to fill that empty space. Finally, if we go around to the back of the build, Moomin had already set up a small backstage area, so this was the natural place to put the maintenance shed, with the entrance opening up onto this small staff car park that was already there. As Moomin said before in other areas of the park, since this is a backstage area, the rear walls wouldn't be decorated, so I followed his lead and just used basic flat concrete walls that would be cheap to build. And then to add some detail, I just threw a few pipes on and some cables here and there, just to make the walls look a little less bare. Right, I've waffled on for way too long now, so I shall send you back to Moomin. But before I do, I just have to say that this series is probably turning into my favourite Western park, although I think I am a little bit biased now.
I was a little worried about what could be achieved in such a small and thin space, but the way SCReconcile utilised the area is outstanding. Yet another demonstration of this man's unbelievable talents. A lot of you may have noticed Little Rock Ridge is missing a dark ride, and who better to provide one than the one and only FSF Ranger. Tune in next week to see what he came up with, but I can say right now, you will not be disappointed. But enough chit chat, let's hop on this beautiful coaster. See you next week. Say goodbye, SCReconcile.
See ya.